Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Ferghal Armstrong.
Hello everyone, my name's Dr. Ferghal Armstrong and welcome to MedHeads. And today we have Anita Fletcher from Standout Medical. Hello Anita, how are you?
Hi, I'm really well, thanks Ferghal. How are you?
I'm very well, and thanks very much for joining us today. So first of all, what is Standout Medical?
Okay, so thank you for inviting me to chat with you today. Standout Medical Careers is a consultancy practice that I established in April of 2020. And I provide services to doctors at every career stage regarding all things their career. So that could be ranging from somebody needing assistance with their CV, bringing it up to date, bringing it down from 16 pages to 5 pages, and preparing for interview skills, career planning, a whole range across the sort of spectrum of career opportunities and opportunities and applications for training programs as well.
Right. So really you walk with medical practitioners from their birth until they get to the top of their chosen field, really. Is that fair to say? Yes,
that's right. And actually I've found that there's a number of doctors that I've been working with for a few years now, since coming across them during my time working for the AMA, the Australian Medical Association. Mm-hmm. And so I'm pleased to say that people keep coming back to get my thoughts and assistance on that next step that they take each year.
So that was actually a useful segue into my next question, which is, what gave you the impetus to set this company up? You know, why you, why here, why now?
Okay, so my background was in HR. I had a sort of long career in business in a number of different areas, sort of operational areas in media settings many years ago. And then I moved into human resources and really enjoy working with people. And then I started working for AMA New South Wales back in 2015, and at that time, they asked me to establish a career service for their members. And once I started doing that work, I sort of felt that I really found my niche and something that I felt that was really valuable, being able to assist doctors who I've got a lot of time for. So it all went from there. I was working for AMA New South Wales and also then Federal AMA. And then I made the decision to go out on my own and see what it was like to, the whole entrepreneurialism thing. I thought I would explore that, I'm very pleased to say it's been fantastic so far.
So we've got so much to talk about, and I'm just trying to think, how can I cut this down to one interview? But for me, and I'm being really selfish here, the interview, how do you prepare for an interview? And I suppose there are different interviews at different stages in one's career. So let's talk about the first, interview after medical school, your first rotation job. How do you prepare for that?
Okay, good question. It's a very popular question. Essentially, the key components of interviews for me are for people to understand, really get their heads around what is their expertise and what do they offer to their prospective employers. So say for that first rotation and how can they put themselves forward with some kind of unique value proposition and show how they are different and from the many others who are at the same stage of their training and work experience. So in order to be able to communicate those things to others, people obviously need to sort of really stop and think about that for themselves and identify what those things are. And whilst that might sound really obvious, people don't necessarily always go through that process themselves. So I hope that people will gain from this conversation terms of thinking, okay, start there, and think about also so what you're offering, what you bring, and how you can differentiate yourself from other candidates. So that might be then, what you want to do then is really highlight and showcase your unique experiences and why they make you a suitable candidate for the position. And then it's a case of I practice with my clients. So practicing lots of questions and also practicing overall communication skills in order to maximise the time, the short amount of time that is available during an interview situation.
So what I'm hearing is that you have to have the substance of the unique selling point ready to go for the interview, and then you have to be able to present that unique selling point. So we've got an issue with substance, and then we've got an issue with presentation. Now, I can remember when I did my first ever rotation job interview, I was green about the ears. I had basically got a medical degree, and back when I was in my career then, having a medical degree just qualified you to sit more exams. It didn't actually qualify you to treat people. And I was always told, sell yourself. And I personally could not think of anything that I'd done special compared to anyone else. How do you deal with that sense of nihilism in someone fresh out of school, out of medical school? Or do you actually have to start saying to people in med school, as they go into med school, you need to start doing something that is different from everybody else? How do you create that substance?
Good question. And it's something I feel quite passionate about, actually, because, and that is telling people at the med school stage, this is what the medical landscape looks like. Getting that medical degree is no golden ticket into the specialty training program of your choice. And beyond that as well, it's not the golden ticket into becoming a consultant in that specialty area, because some specialties are incredibly challenged by this, what they call the exit block, which represents the number of candidates coming out of a specialty program and funneling into a very limited number of actual employment positions available. So I've actually developed an online training course for medical students to give them the heads up on that, because so many doctors that I've worked with have said, I wish I knew when I was at medical school what I should be doing in order to better position myself for those opportunities, because once you've gone past it, it's obviously too late. You can't go back. So the sorts of things that people, where they do differentiate themselves are, for example, an obvious one is, research, developing research skills, leadership skills as well, and involvement in different, for example, committees that I see a lot of medical CVs, and those people who are sort of have got their antennae up from an early stage, or they've been advised by someone who knows, they're the people who you can see it on their CVs. They were aware of it early on, and they started making those inroads early in their career. So I would say, sorry, go on.
I was being facetious. I was going to say an intimate understanding of the biochemistry of the various top shelf liqueurs that I acquired during my medical school training is not something that you can put onto a CV. You've got to do something substantive. Spending time in a pub is just, it's no longer an option.
That's right. That's right.
So you've mentioned committee work, you've mentioned research, and how do you actually determine what committees to go onto and what research skills that you might need? And you also mentioned leadership skills. How do you demonstrate those things?
Okay, well, I'm also really big on identifying what people's interests are and what they enjoy doing. And I think that if you sort of steer towards what you're naturally gravitating towards, you kind of can't go wrong, because you're satisfying your own needs your professional development needs, and also, you know, you are then, if you say, for example, choose to do some volunteer work in a particular area, you're still, it doesn't necessarily matter exactly what it is at that stage of the game. It's the fact that you've undertaken that activity, that you've shown that initiative, and you've shown the commitment, and then you've worked to develop particular skills, that's what future recruiters and selectors will be looking for. So it should be, about what your interests are. And so, for example, with research, obviously, regardless of what the research topic is, the core skills are going to be similar, if not the same, across the board in different areas of research. So it's the ability to, get onto a project and collect the data and communicate with others and working with a team. And that's what people are looking for, the development of those skills.
So we've talked about the need to, even before you leave medical school, to have some substantive experience in something outside the immediate medical curriculum. And the second part of your original response was you need to actually also be able to present this. So what are the skills of presentation that we need to develop? And what are the skills that you see that are lacking in certain candidates?
Thank you for asking that question, because this is where people can really help themselves by paying attention to these areas. So first of all, getting your story down on paper. Often your CV is the first impression and the first contact that you have with a lot of the people that are looking at applications. And that, again, might seem really obvious, but when there are some CVs that I've seen in my time that I could look at and think, well, I can understand why you may not be getting called for interview, because that first impression really isn't meeting the grade. So, I really encourage people to think about those communications. So their CV, even if they're writing an email to someone, to be very mindful that these are documents that more than one person might be looking at. They might be kept on file for a really long time, and it is that first meeting or experience that those people have of you. So if you haven't taken the care to present your CV in a clear and concise, easy to read and easy to digest format, people aren't going to be interested. They'll put you on the no pile, and the CVs that will get onto the yes pile are the ones that are clear, as I said, well formatted, and most importantly that they have the information there that's relevant to the position for which the person's applying. So first there's that one written application document. Often there's selection criteria responses that are really important as well. And all the junior doctors will know about that, and the more senior doctors as well. They're still having to provide those well into their careers. And actually one of my clients last year came to me and said, he was trying to get onto an anaesthetic scheme job. And he said, last year I got some feedback that one set of selection criteria responses I submitted, the first 6 or so were done really well. And then by the time I got to the last 2, I'd sort of, didn't pay so much attention to those. So the feedback that he received was, each of those responses carries equal weight when it comes to scoring. So you need to ensure that you pay just as much attention to all of those. And as I said, they're written records, and they're going to be around for a while for people to look at. So that's kind of on the written side of things. And then in terms of presentation, also how you turn up to interview and how well you communicate in those interview settings.
Well, that's a huge subject.
It
How to
is.
communicate an interview. My
Yeah.
first question about interviews is, do you think that interviews are actually any good at finding the right candidate for the right job?
Well, that's a good question. I wasn't expecting that. I think so, yes, because one of the core functions of an interview is for the selectors to put a name to a face or a face to a name and get a sense and to meet the person that they're considering to bring into their team. So to my mind, you know, in an interview is the best way to establish that, because it's to some degree, you know, that's introducing that sort of human and people element into it, because at the end of the day, you know, it's the people who you're going to be working with that are going to be getting the job done. And, you know, an interview affords the opportunity to gauge whether there's that right rapport and whether the personalities with the team are all going to gel well with this candidate. So, you know, that's where people talk about, we want to get someone who's the right fit within our organisation. So be that within medicine or further afield, you know, because at the end of the day, it's people working together. So I think that interviews are a valuable tool for determining those things.
So what are the mistakes that you see people make at interview?
Okay, lack of preparation,
Yeah.
leaving their preparation till the last minute, which only then heightens their anxiety about the interview process and their nerves. I've had doctors come to me and say, I need your help because I'm fine talking with people in my day-to-day job. When it comes to interviews, I can't think straight. I can't communicate well. I start to, you know, speak too fast or tell stories that are too long. So there's a range of areas that people really should be working on. And through that preparation and practice that I spoke of earlier, people's performance can improve markedly. And I do see those outcomes with the people that I work with.
And are there a stock set of questions, or is there a stock set of questions that you kind of have to know the answers to, you know, and that are applicable in various domains and scenarios?
Well, of course, it's an infinite number of questions really that anybody could ask in an interview, but essentially they tend to follow similar themes. And sometimes actually some of them can be flipped the other way. So one example of that was there was a fellow that I was working with recently who was applying for their first consultant's position. And this client of mine said to me, oh, you know, that question we practice, they asked that. They said, but they turned it around the other way. So I think it was something along the lines of, the question that we had practiced was, tell us about a time where you've experienced resistance to a change that you were trying to implement from other members of the team. So the other people were resisting the change that you wanted to put into place. And this doctor said to me, they turned it around and they said, when have you resisted the change that was being asked of you? So, you know, there's obviously so many variations, but that's one example of, you know, sort of it's worth sort of really thinking about questions from different angles. And again, practicing a wide range of questions because, you know, there's so many that can be asked.
So one of the questions that I have had to answer was, tell us a time when you demonstrated leadership. And I find that question personally very difficult to answer because I sometimes fail to see what I do in terms of that leadership lens. How do you define leadership and how do you advise people on how to demonstrate their leadership?
Well, there are many definitions of leadership, and the way I see it is that leadership really is about bringing other people along to achieve the goal of that team or that organisation. So it's really about the influence that you can have in order to get people on board and to work with you in order to achieve a common result. And I've seen a lot of examples throughout my career of people who were put in management positions, but that didn't make them good leaders. And I often would look and think, okay, they've got this great idea and they want to, implement something and make a change, this big improvement. Here's what we're going to do. But unless you get the buy-in from the big team of people who you've asked to be a part of that, you're going to struggle to really succeed with that, or it's going to take a lot longer than would be ideal. So that would be my definition of leadership. And the way that people could demonstrate that is through thinking about examples of when they have undertaken those sorts of activities. So ideally it's within a professional setting, but you also see on CVs doctors' involvements not only in sort of committees and those professional type activities, but, people list down their sporting achievements and their sporting experience. So that can demonstrate that you've got leadership qualities. If you've captained for Australia in any particular team sport, well, that probably says something about your ability to lead other people. So that's a relevant example for people to bring in as well. So essentially, I really ask people to think about and think outside sometimes of those more immediate settings or examples that they think are relevant and think beyond that a little bit more.
Yeah, it is very difficult, I think, for some people to actually tease apart what they do, on a near daily basis sometimes. Because I think there is a difference between leadership and project management.
Yes.
Would you agree? And if so, why?
Yes. Well, I think project management's more about, it's very task focused. And so, of course, projects, need to have tasks set out and deadlines put in place. And that's part of leadership too, to establish the project. But the bigger part of leadership is setting forward, creating the vision and out expressing to the team, here are the goals that, I would like us to achieve or that the organisation wants to achieve, getting their input into it as well, and getting feedback and creating that feeling of teamwork and inclusiveness within the people that you're working with. So to me, leadership's more about people and bringing people along with it and utilising and maximising the skills and the expertise of people. Whereas project management, to me, whilst it involves people doing tasks, that's very much about sort of achieving particular objectives along the way that are part of that goal.
So leadership versus organizing ability, would that be a fair keyword delineation?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So leaders aren't necessarily the best organizers.
That's right.
And vice versa.
That's right, because often the leaders are taking the bigger picture view as well, and they're outsourcing the organising to others.
Anita, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I really would like the opportunity of exploring these issues with you again in the near future. Thank you so much for joining with us today.
You're really welcome. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Ferghal, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
That's all for today's MedHeads. My name's Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, and we'll see you next time.